Reflection is the practice of deliberately and analytically thinking about yourself, studying your own experiences, responses, thought processes, actions, and decisions. It's quite a skill, and stopping to explore and analyse our own thinking and actions doesn't always come naturally, but it can be learned. And if it becomes a habit, it can help you to become a reflective practitioner, whether during your studies or as a professional. As reflection is quite a challenging thing to do, you could use a formal reflective model to structure and guide your thinking. If you've been set a reflective assignment, you might be required to apply a particular reflective model, or you could be given a choice of different frameworks, or you might simply be told to reflect. You might be using a reflective model more loosely, simply as a way to prompt your thinking to deeper levels, or you might be asked to use the model more formally as a structure for your writing too. So, how do you go about reflection? There are different reflective models to help prompt you and structure your reflection, which we'll look at in a moment, but at its heart, the secret to reflective practice is about asking yourself questions. These questions can be directed at different aspects of your own experience and nudge you from description to analysing and critiquing, and then to evaluating and drawing conclusions about yourself or your past or future actions. High-level thinking is a characteristic of university study, and it's there in reflective writing as well as the more traditional types of assessment. For example, you could ask descriptive questions about what happened, such as what, when, where, or who. Higher-level questions such as why or how might prompt you to analyse it more deeply, apply a bit of theory to your practice to help you understand or explain it better, or position it in a wider context. You can also ask critical questions that encourage evaluation or synthesis, such as how effective, or so what if, what next? It's these higher level questions that make really good quality analytical reflection, rather than just telling the story of what happened to you. However you structure your reflective writing, you need to find the right balance between description and those higher levels of critical analysis. You could develop your own reflective model to ask yourself these questions in a systematic way, or you could follow one of the more established reflective models that exist, each of which pose you questions structured along a framework moving from description up to higher levels. You might be told which model to use, or you might be invited to select one. Most reflective models focus to a greater or lesser extent on three aspects: the experience itself that you're reflecting on, the actual reflection, which might focus on different things or be more or less in depth, and action, the lessons you've learned or what you might do next time. Each of the models that we'll look at will have a different balance of these aspects, so think about the assignment you've been set. If it doesn't specify a model for you to use, then look at what's being mostly asked for to help you make that decision. Are you demonstrating and evidencing learning and achievement? Are you making sense of an experience? Are you evaluating and reconsidering something you've done? Or are you focusing more on external events and actions, or inner thoughts, feelings and perceptions? The other thing that most of these models have in common is the relationship between the past, the present, and very often the future. You might be asked to look in detail at what you were thinking at the time, reflection in action, but also at revisiting that thinking with the benefit of hindsight, reflection on action in the present. These two perspectives might be very different, as you see things differently or change your mind. Time, past, present and future, is an important feature of reflective practice. Some models might also ask you to look forwards to applying your new insights next time. Let's look at some of the models, including the more common ones and some which are used less often, but which might help prompt your thinking to deeper levels of reflection. This isn't an exhaustive list, but covers the ones you're most likely to use. Driscoll. This is the simplest reflective model, and as you can see, asks you only 3 questions, which you can interpret as broadly as you like. What happened? This invites you to describe the past events you'll be analysing. So what? Prompts you to explain and analyse these past events from your present perspective. And finally, now what? Asks you to draw lessons and set goals for the future. As a model, it has the advantage of simplicity and informality, and it's quite a good tool for reflection in practice, that is, in the moment, as well as a good reminder when writing to move on from pure description. It focuses more on external events than your own inner development, however, and may lead to superficial reflection. STAR. The STAR model has 4 stages, so is a bit more complex. It asks you firstly to outline the situation and give the reader a bit of context, before focusing on the task or what you are aiming to achieve. You're then asked to outline the actions you took towards that goal with your reasoning and decision making, and then finally to describe the result or outcome, and perhaps evaluate it or explain why it worked or didn't work. This model offers a good basis for a clear narrative, and it's more geared to demonstrating your abilities and achievements rather than critiquing them. It concentrates more on outward events and focuses more on the descriptive, so it might be suitable for demonstrating that you meet criteria, for example, in an application for a job or professional accreditation, rather than a more evaluative or analytical reflection. Kolb. Kolb's reflective cycle is one of the 2 most common reflective models and is based on a theory of how people learn from experience. Unlike the previous 2, it presents reflective learning as an ongoing cyclical process in which new learning leads to new experiences, which in turn lead to more learning, and so on. It gives you a clear structure to reflect with to demonstrate your learning. You begin with identifying and describing a concrete experience which sparked some learning. You then move on to analysing and making observations on that experience, what you noticed, whether now or at the time, what you thought about it, whether it went well or not, taking a step back and thinking more reflectively about it. You then begin to analyse more deeply and draw more abstract, generalised conclusions about it, moving away from that specific incident and synthesising more broadly applicable insights and principles. Finally, you turn this into lessons learned, which you'll apply and experiment with in future when you next get an opportunity. Kolb's model is especially useful when you're demonstrating that you can learn from experience and take control of your own development. There's the opportunity to bring literature and theory in here to help you reflect and form abstract principles, and also to evaluate your planning and experimentation, but it's not explicitly mentioned, so don't overlook it. Gibbs. Gibbs is the other of the 2 most commonly used models. Again, it's a cycle, like Kolb, but is a bit more detailed, with 6 stages rather than 4. The first, as ever, asks you to describe what happened. Next, you're invited to turn your attention inwards and identify what you were thinking and feeling at the time, because this is an important factor in explaining why you might have made certain decisions or actions and what might have influenced them, and how you might be thinking differently now. Next, you evaluate the experience. What was good and bad about it, or what did you do well or not so well? In the next stage, we're moving on again to more general and abstract thinking, analysing it and making sense of it. Why did it happen that way? You're then asked to draw conclusions about the whole incident. What could you have done differently, for example? Or, if it worked, what might you do again? And to round it off, we again look to the future with an action plan. If this or a similar situation arose again, what would you do? Gibbs has a much stronger focus on critiquing and evaluating your experience and is often used in professional practitioner subjects such as health or social care, business or teaching. There are other reflective models and frameworks, of course. This one from Holm and Stevenson is the most complex yet, asking lots of questions. You probably won't be asked to apply this one, but it might be a useful source of questions to flesh out some of the others. And you could also construct your own, using your own questions in a structure that works best for you and your assignment. Whichever model you choose or are told to use, be aware that you may still be required to be critical when analysing your experience, even if the model doesn't explicitly call for it. Justify why you've chosen to look at a specific incident or aspect of your experience. Challenge your own assumptions and perceptions rather than accepting them at face value. Try seeing them from a different perspective. You might also be asked to bring in references to theory or other literature to help you make sense of your own experience, contextualise it more broadly, or make predictions about the likely success of your chosen action plan. You'll also need to include concrete evidence to back up your points. Evidence from your own experience rather than academic research, but it still needs to be presented. And above all, make sure that you aren't just describing what happened to you. Reflection is not just storytelling.